The morning light filtered through the grand windows of Kensington Palace, casting long shadows across the polished floors. William stood at his study window, watching the early joggers in Hyde Park below, their rhythmic steps echoing the steady beat of a heart that refused to slow down. 3 weeks had passed since that devastating phone call from the hospital, yet the words still rang in his ears with crystal clarity. "Your Royal Highness, we need to discuss the Duchess's condition immediately." Catherine had always been the picture of grace and strength. From their university days at St. Andrews to their fairy tale wedding watched by millions, she had navigated every challenge with an elegance that seemed almost supernatural. The public knew her as the radiant Duchess of Cambridge, the woman who brought warmth and modernity to the ancient institution of monarchy. But William knew her as Kate, the girl who laughed until she snorted, who burned toast on Sunday mornings, and who could calm his deepest anxieties with just a look. The diagnosis had come like a thief in the night, stealing their carefully constructed sense of security. It started with what seemed like simple fatigue. Catherine had been working tirelessly on her early childhood development initiatives, traveling across the country to visit nurseries and speak with families. She had always been a perfectionist, often staying up late reviewing reports and preparing for the next day's engagements. When she began experiencing headaches and occasional dizziness, they both attributed it to stress and overwork. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the royal physician, had been monitoring Catherine's health for months. Initially, she too believed the symptoms were stress-related. The Duchess had been carrying an enormous workload, supporting numerous charities while raising 3 young children and fulfilling her royal duties. But when Catherine collapsed during a private visit to a children's hospital in Manchester, everything changed in an instant. William remembered that day with painful clarity. He had been in his office at Kensington Palace, reviewing documents for an upcoming Commonwealth visit, when his private secretary burst through the door with unprecedented urgency. The color had drained from the man's usually composed face as he delivered the news that would forever alter their lives. Catherine had been rushed to the hospital after losing consciousness during what was supposed to be a routine visit to meet with young patients. The helicopter ride to Manchester felt like an eternity. William stared out at the countryside passing below, his mind racing through every possible scenario. He called Catherine's phone repeatedly, knowing she wouldn't answer, but needing to hear her voicemail message just to feel connected to her voice. The pilot, sensing the gravity of the situation, pushed the aircraft to its maximum speed while maintaining the careful balance required for royal security protocols. When he arrived at the hospital, the scene was controlled chaos. Security personnel had cordoned off an entire wing, medical staff moved with purposeful urgency, and the hospital's senior administrators looked as though they had aged years in a matter of hours. Dr. James Patterson, the hospital's chief neurologist, met William at the entrance with the kind of expression that immediately signaled bad news. Catherine was conscious when William reached her bedside, but something fundamental had changed. The vibrant spark that usually lit up her eyes seemed dimmed, as if a veil had been drawn across her inner light. She squeezed his hand when he sat beside her, offering a weak smile that broke his heart into 1,000 pieces. In that moment, surrounded by the sterile walls of the hospital room and the quiet hum of medical equipment, William realized that their world was about to be turned completely upside down. The preliminary tests revealed what Dr. Patterson described as concerning anomalies in Catherine's brain scans. More comprehensive testing would be required to determine the exact nature and extent of the condition, but the initial findings suggested a progressive neurological disorder that could significantly impact her cognitive and physical functions over time. The word progressive echoed in William's mind like a death sentence, each letter carrying the weight of an uncertain and frightening future. That evening, as Catherine slept fitfully in the hospital bed, William sat in the uncomfortable chair beside her, holding her hand and watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. He thought about their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, who were at home with their nanny, believing their mother was simply away on one of her usual work trips. How do you explain to children that their mother, the strongest person they know, is fighting a battle that might be impossible to win? The next few days blurred together in a haze of medical consultations, specialist appointments, and increasingly complex discussions about treatment options. Catherine underwent every test imaginable: MRIs, CT scans, blood work, and cognitive assessments that left her exhausted and frustrated. William watched helplessly as teams of doctors poked and prodded the woman he loved, each test potentially bringing them closer to a definitive diagnosis, but also closer to a reality he wasn't ready to face. Dr. Emily Hartwell, a renowned neurologist from Johns Hopkins who had been flown in specifically for Catherine's case, delivered the final diagnosis with the clinical precision of someone who had broken similar news countless times before. The condition was rare, affecting fewer than 1 in 100,000 people, and while treatments existed to slow its progression, there was no cure. The timeline was uncertain. Some patients lived normal lives for decades, while others experienced rapid decline within months. Catherine took the news with characteristic composure, asking detailed questions about treatment options and prognosis, while William felt his world crumble around him. She wanted to know about the latest research, experimental treatments, and how the condition might affect her ability to fulfill her royal duties. Even facing the unknown, her first thoughts were of her responsibilities to others, her dedication to service unwavering despite the personal crisis unfolding around her. The specialist explained that the condition would likely affect Catherine's motor skills first, causing tremors and difficulty with fine movements. Speech might become affected over time, and cognitive changes were possible, though their extent was unpredictable. Some patients experienced personality changes, while others remained mentally sharp even as their bodies betrayed them. The uncertainty was perhaps the cruelest aspect of all. They could prepare for many possibilities, but could guarantee nothing. William spent sleepless nights researching Catherine's condition, reading medical journals, and connecting with specialists around the world. He discovered support groups for families dealing with similar diagnoses, stories of hope and despair, breakthrough treatments, and heartbreaking losses. The more he learned, the more he understood that their journey would be unlike anything they had faced before, requiring a strength and resilience that would test the very foundations of their relationship. The decision about when and how to inform the children was perhaps the most agonizing of all. Child psychologists advised honesty appropriate to their ages, emphasizing that children were remarkably resilient and could handle truth better than uncertainty. But how do you explain to a child that their parent has an illness that will only get worse, never better? How do you maintain hope while acknowledging a frightening reality? Catherine insisted on telling the children herself, in her own way and in her own time. She spent hours researching age-appropriate ways to discuss illness and mortality, consulting with experts in child psychology, and drawing on her own experience in early childhood development. She wanted to protect their innocence while preparing them for the changes that lay ahead, a delicate balance that required all of her considerable wisdom and maternal instinct. The conversation took place on a quiet Sunday afternoon in their private sitting room at Kensington Palace. Catherine had chosen this familiar, comfortable space deliberately, wanting the children to feel safe and loved as they processed difficult information. George, at 10 years old, was old enough to understand the seriousness of the situation, while Charlotte and Louis would need simpler explanations and more emotional support. Catherine explained that she had become sick in a way that medicine couldn't completely fix, but that doctors were working hard to help her feel better for as long as possible. She assured them that she would always love them, that their father would always take care of them, and that they would face whatever came next together as a family. The children asked the questions that children ask. Would she die? Would it hurt? Could they catch it? And Catherine answered each one with honesty tempered by love. William watched this conversation unfold with a mixture of pride and heartbreak that threatened to overwhelm him completely. Catherine's strength in the face of unthinkable circumstances, her ability to comfort their children while dealing with her own fears, reminded him why he had fallen in love with her all those years ago. Even facing the greatest challenge of her life, she remained the anchor that held their family together. The public announcement would come later, carefully crafted by palace communications staff to convey the necessary information while maintaining some semblance of privacy during an impossibly difficult time. But, for now, in this moment, they were simply a family grappling with news that would change everything they thought they knew about their future together. The weeks following the diagnosis passed in a strange twilight between normalcy and profound change. Catherine insisted on maintaining as much of her regular schedule as possible, determined not to let the illness define her or limit her ability to serve. She attended charity galas with the same radiant smile that had charmed the nation for years, visited schools and hospitals with undiminished enthusiasm, and continued her passionate advocacy for early childhood development as if nothing had changed. But William saw the subtle differences that others missed. The way Catherine gripped his arm a little tighter during public appearances, steadying herself against occasional dizziness. The careful placement of water glasses within easy reach during speeches prepared for the moments when her voice might falter. The slight tremor in her left hand that she cleverly disguised by carrying a clutch purse or keeping her hands clasped behind her back during official photographs. Dr. Hartwell had started Catherine on an experimental treatment protocol that showed promise in slowing the progression of her condition. The medication required careful monitoring and came with its own set of challenging side effects: fatigue that went beyond normal tiredness, nausea that made her favorite foods suddenly unappetizing, and cognitive fog that occasionally left her searching for words that had always come easily. The treatment schedule was demanding, requiring regular hospital visits for intravenous infusions and frequent blood tests to monitor her body's response to the powerful medications. Catherine approached these medical appointments with the same methodical preparation she brought to state visits, organizing her schedule around treatment days and learning everything possible about her condition and the latest research developments. William accompanied her to every appointment, transforming from prince to devoted caregiver without hesitation. He learned to recognize the early warning signs of her difficult days, adjusting their schedule and expectations accordingly. He mastered the art of subtle assistance, helping Catherine navigate challenging moments without drawing attention to her struggles or making her feel diminished in any way. The children adapted to their new reality with the remarkable resilience that Catherine had hoped for, but not without their own moments of confusion and fear. George began staying closer to home, choosing to spend afternoons in the palace gardens rather than visiting friends, as if his presence could somehow protect his mother from the illness that threatened their family's stability. Charlotte started drawing pictures of families holding hands under bright suns, her artwork becoming a visual prayer for better days ahead. Louis, too young to fully understand the medical complexities, simply noticed that Mummy seemed more tired and needed more hugs. He began bringing her his favorite stuffed animals when she rested, creating elaborate scenarios where toy lions and elephants provided magical healing powers. His innocent gestures often brought Catherine to tears, overwhelmed by the pure love of a child who wanted nothing more than to make his mother feel better. The palace staff rallied around Catherine with touching dedication, adjusting protocols and procedures to accommodate her changing needs without ever making her feel like a burden. Her private secretary reorganized her calendar to include regular rest periods between engagements. The kitchen staff learned to prepare easily digestible meals that wouldn't aggravate her treatment-related nausea. Security personnel developed discreet systems to provide additional support during public appearances without drawing unwanted attention. Catherine's sister Pippa became an increasingly important source of support, visiting regularly and helping to maintain some semblance of normal family life. She organized quiet gatherings where Catherine could relax without the pressure of royal protocol, creating spaces where she could simply be Kate again, someone's sister, someone's friend, someone's mother, rather than a public figure managing a devastating diagnosis. The media, initially unaware of the full extent of Catherine's condition, began noting subtle changes in her public appearances. Royal watchers speculated about a possible fourth pregnancy when she appeared slightly unsteady at a garden party, while others wondered if she was simply tired from her demanding schedule. The palace communications team worked carefully to manage public expectations while protecting Catherine's privacy during this vulnerable time. William found himself caught between his roles as husband, father, and future king. His natural instinct was to shield Catherine from all stress and responsibility, to wrap her in protective isolation where the disease couldn't reach her. But he also understood that taking away her sense of purpose and contribution would be its own form of cruelty. Catherine had always derived tremendous meaning from her work, and continuing to serve others remained essential to her sense of identity and self-worth. The treatment protocol began showing modest signs of success after 2 months. Catherine's tremors stabilized rather than worsening, and some of her cognitive symptoms improved slightly. Dr. Hartwell cautioned that the positive response might be temporary, but any improvement felt like a victory worth celebrating. Catherine marked these small triumphs with quiet determination, using her better days to accomplish as much as possible while building memories with her family. During one particularly good week, Catherine insisted on taking the children to Scotland for a private holiday at Balmoral. She wanted to show them the places that had shaped William's childhood, to create new memories and landscapes that held deep meaning for their family. They spent long days walking through Highland meadows, teaching the children to fish in streams that had challenged generations of royal children before them. William watched Catherine during these precious days, memorizing the way sunlight caught the golden highlights in her hair, the sound of her laughter echoing across ancient hills, the gentle patience with which she helped Louis untangle his fishing line for the 10th time. These moments felt both eternal and fleeting, perfect and heartbreaking in their beauty and fragility. The children seemed to sense the special nature of this time together, asking fewer questions about electronic devices and showing more interest in the simple pleasures of outdoor exploration. Charlotte collected smooth stones from the riverbank, declaring each one to be a magical talisman that would keep their family safe. George learned to identify different bird calls, determined to master this skill so he could share it with his mother on future visits. Evenings at Balmoral became treasured family rituals. Catherine would read to the children by the fireplace, while William played soft melodies on an old piano that had entertained royal children for generations. These quiet moments felt removed from the medical appointments and treatment schedules that had begun to dominate their lives in London, offering a glimpse of the peaceful contentment they all desperately craved. But even in this idyllic setting, the reality of Catherine's condition remained an unwelcome companion. She experienced several episodes of severe fatigue that left her bedridden for entire days, forcing the cancellation of planned activities and reminding everyone that their time together was precious and uncertain. William learned to read the warning signs, the slight glassiness in her eyes, the way she would pause mid-sentence as if gathering strength to continue speaking. The return to London marked a transition to a new phase of Catherine's treatment. Dr. Hartwell recommended joining a clinical trial for an innovative therapy that had shown remarkable results in early testing. The treatment was more aggressive than her current protocol, with potentially more severe side effects, but it also offered the possibility of significantly slowing or even temporarily halting the disease's progression. Catherine approached this decision with characteristic thoroughness, consulting with multiple specialists and researching every aspect of the experimental treatment. She wanted to understand not just the potential benefits, but also the risks, both to her health and to her ability to fulfill her responsibilities as a mother and public figure. The choice ultimately came down to a calculation between quality of life and quantity of time, a decision no one should have to make, but one that faced many patients dealing with progressive illnesses. The family meeting to discuss the clinical trial took place on a rainy Tuesday evening in Catherine's private sitting room. The children were asleep upstairs, and the palace felt unusually quiet as Catherine and William weighed options that would affect not just their immediate family, but potentially their royal duties and public responsibilities for years to come. Catherine's voice was steady as she explained her decision to William, but her hands betrayed the emotion she worked so hard to control. She had chosen to participate in the clinical trial, not just for the potential personal benefits, but also to contribute to research that might help other families facing similar diagnoses. Even in her darkest moments, her instinct was to serve others, to find meaning in suffering by transforming it into hope for those who might follow. William held her hands as she spoke, feeling the slight tremor that had become their constant companion, and marveled once again at her courage. The woman he had married was facing the greatest challenge imaginable with grace and determination that humbled him completely. As they sat together in the lamplight, planning for an uncertain future, he realized that love wasn't just about sharing joy, but about choosing to walk together through valleys that tested everything you thought you knew about strength and commitment. The clinical trial would begin the following month, requiring Catherine to spend several days each week at the hospital receiving experimental treatments. The protocols were demanding and the outcome uncertain, but she faced this new challenge with the same methodical preparation and quiet courage that had carried her through royal tours, state dinners, and the 1,000 other obligations that came with her position. As they prepared for bed that evening, Catherine surprised William by expressing gratitude for the time they had been given, both before and after the diagnosis. She spoke about the privilege of loving and being loved, about the joy of watching their children grow, and about the deep satisfaction that came from serving something greater than themselves. Her perspective humbled him and reminded him that even in the face of devastating loss, life continued to offer moments of profound beauty and meaning worth celebrating. The clinical trial began on a crisp autumn morning when the London plane trees were just beginning to shed their golden leaves. Catherine arrived at the research hospital with William beside her, both of them maintaining the composed dignity that had become second nature after years of public life. The experimental treatment center felt different from traditional hospitals, more hopeful somehow, filled with cutting-edge equipment and researchers who spoke about possibilities rather than limitations. Dr. Rebecca Chun, the lead researcher overseeing the trial, explained the treatment protocol with infectious enthusiasm. The therapy involved targeted genetic modification designed to slow or halt the progression of Catherine's neurological condition. Early results from similar patients had been encouraging, with some participants experiencing not just stabilization but actual improvement in their symptoms. Catherine listened intently, asking detailed questions that demonstrated her thorough preparation for this next phase of her journey. The treatment itself was surprisingly gentle for something so revolutionary. Catherine would receive infusions twice weekly, each session lasting approximately 4 hours. She could read, work on correspondence, or simply rest while the modified cells worked to repair and protect her nervous system. William arranged his schedule to be present for every session, transforming the sterile treatment room into a temporary office where they could continue some of their royal duties while fighting for Catherine's future. The first few sessions passed without significant side effects, allowing Catherine to maintain her modified public schedule. She attended the opening of a new children's hospital wing with genuine enthusiasm, her speech clear and strong as she spoke about the importance of investing in pediatric care. Photographers captured her radiant smile as she interacted with young patients, completely unaware that she was battling her own medical challenges. But the treatment's effects began to manifest during the third week. Catherine experienced what Dr. Chun described as immune activation symptoms, fever, fatigue, and cognitive changes that left her feeling disconnected from her usual sharp mental clarity. She would start sentences and lose track of her thoughts midway through, or reach for familiar words that seemed to have vanished from her vocabulary entirely. William watched these episodes with growing concern, seeing glimpses of what their future might hold. During one particularly difficult evening, Catherine sat at her writing desk trying to compose a letter to a young girl who had written asking for advice about dealing with bullies at school. Catherine had always prided herself on personally responding to children's letters, but now she stared at the blank paper with tears of frustration, unable to organize her thoughts into coherent sentences. "I know exactly what I want to say," she whispered to William, her voice breaking with exhaustion. "I can see the words in my mind, but they won't come out right. This little girl needs encouragement, and I can't even write a simple letter." William gently guided her away from the desk, promising to help her compose the letter when she felt better, but they both understood that this represented a fundamental shift in Catherine's capabilities. The children began noticing more obvious changes in their mother's condition. Charlotte asked why Mummy sometimes forgot their bedtime stories halfway through reading them. George wondered why his mother needed help with simple tasks like opening jars or writing shopping lists. Louis, with the blunt honesty of a young child, announced at dinner one evening that Mummy seemed different, though he couldn't explain exactly how. Catherine's response to these observations revealed the depth of her maternal strength. Rather than hiding her struggles, she used them as teaching opportunities about resilience, adaptation, and the importance of asking for help when needed. She explained to the children that sometimes people's bodies don't work the way they're supposed to, but that love and family support can help overcome almost any challenge. The experimental treatment began showing measurable results after 6 weeks. Catherine's brain scans revealed subtle but encouraging improvements, and some of her motor symptoms stabilized. Dr. Chun was cautiously optimistic, noting that Catherine's response to the therapy was among the most positive they had observed in the trial. However, she also warned that the treatment's long-term effectiveness remained uncertain, and continued participation in the study would require ongoing commitment and monitoring. Catherine threw herself into the trial with characteristic determination, meticulously tracking her symptoms and responses to help researchers better understand the treatment's effects. She kept detailed journals documenting her daily experiences, cognitive changes, and physical symptoms. Her contributions to the research became as important as her personal treatment, providing valuable data that could benefit future patients facing similar challenges. William found himself learning an entirely new vocabulary related to neurological conditions, clinical trials, and experimental treatments. He studied research papers, attended medical conferences, and connected with other families navigating similar journeys. This knowledge became both empowering and overwhelming, providing hope for potential breakthroughs while also revealing the limited options available for Catherine's specific condition. The palace staff adapted their procedures to accommodate Catherine's changing needs with remarkable grace and creativity. Her private secretary developed new systems for managing correspondence when Catherine's writing became difficult. Security personnel learned to recognize signs that she might need additional support during public appearances. The communications team crafted statements that acknowledged Catherine's health challenges without compromising her privacy or dignity. Catherine's relationship with the media became more complex as her condition progressed. Royal photographers noticed subtle changes in her public appearances, moments of hesitation during speeches, occasions when William seemed to provide extra physical support, instances when her usual animated gestures appeared more controlled. The palace communications team worked carefully to maintain Catherine's privacy while acknowledging that some changes were becoming increasingly difficult to hide. A particularly challenging moment came during a state dinner at Buckingham Palace. Catherine had been looking forward to the event, which honored visiting dignitaries from several Commonwealth nations. She had spent weeks preparing, studying briefing materials about each guest, and planning conversation topics that would demonstrate Britain's continued commitment to Commonwealth partnerships. The evening began beautifully, with Catherine radiant in a stunning gown that complemented the formal grandeur of the state dining room. She moved gracefully through the receiving line, greeting each guest with warmth and appropriate cultural sensitivity. Her conversation was engaging and well-informed, and she seemed to be managing the demands of the evening without difficulty. But, during the main course, Catherine experienced what Dr. Chun would later identify as a temporary cognitive episode related to her treatment. She was speaking with the Prime Minister of a Caribbean nation about hurricane recovery efforts when her words suddenly became jumbled and unclear. William, seated nearby, immediately recognized the warning signs and smoothly redirected the conversation while Catherine regained her composure. The incident lasted less than 2 minutes, and most guests remained unaware that anything unusual had occurred. But Catherine knew, and William knew, and the knowledge that such episodes could happen without warning added a new layer of uncertainty to their already challenging situation. The evening concluded successfully, but both Catherine and William understood that their public life would require even more careful management going forward. Catherine's relationship with her extended family deepened during this period. Her parents, Michael and Carol Middleton, became regular presences at Kensington Palace, providing additional support for the children and emotional reinforcement for their daughter. They had always maintained a close relationship, but Catherine's illness brought them even closer together as they faced the frightening possibility of loss. Pippa took on increasing responsibilities related to Catherine's charity work, representing her sister at events when treatment schedules or health concerns made appearances impossible. She studied Catherine's approaches to various causes, learning to speak knowledgeably about early childhood development and mental health advocacy. Her dedication allowed Catherine to maintain her charitable commitments even when her physical presence was not possible. The autumn progressed with a mixture of encouraging medical news and challenging personal adjustments. Catherine's response to the experimental treatment continued to exceed expectations, with several of her symptoms showing marked improvement. But the cumulative effects of months of medical procedures, medications, and emotional stress were taking their toll on her overall well-being and energy levels. William found himself serving as Catherine's primary advocate in medical settings, learning to ask the right questions and push for the best possible care while respecting her autonomy and decision-making authority. He developed relationships with each member of her medical team, understanding their different perspectives and ensuring that Catherine received comprehensive, coordinated care. The children's school became an important source of stability and normalcy during this turbulent time. Teachers and administrators provided extra support without making the children feel singled out or different from their classmates. George, Charlotte, and Louis continued to excel academically and socially, demonstrating remarkable resilience in the face of family challenges that would test even adult coping mechanisms. Catherine insisted on attending the children's school Christmas play, despite feeling particularly unwell that week. She wanted to maintain normal family traditions and show her children that her love and support remained constant regardless of her health challenges. Sitting in the school auditorium, watching Charlotte perform as an angel and Louis beam with pride as a shepherd, Catherine felt overwhelmed by gratitude for these ordinary moments that had become extraordinarily precious. The performance was a reminder that life continued to unfold with beauty and joy even in the midst of struggle. Children grew and learned and discovered their talents. Seasons changed from autumn to winter, bringing holidays and celebrations that anchored families in traditions larger than any individual crisis. Love persisted and even deepened when tested by circumstances that revealed what truly mattered. As December approached, Catherine began planning what she privately wondered might be their last Christmas together in their current circumstances. She wanted the holiday to be perfect, filled with traditions the children would remember fondly, gifts that reflected careful thought and attention, and moments of joy that could sustain the family through whatever challenges lay ahead. Her determination to create lasting memories became both heartbreaking and inspiring, revealing once again her extraordinary capacity to find hope and purpose even in the darkest circumstances. Christmas preparations at Kensington Palace took on a poignant intensity as Catherine poured herself into creating what she hoped would be a perfect holiday for her family. Despite experiencing increasingly frequent episodes of fatigue and cognitive confusion, she insisted on personally selecting gifts for each family member, writing heartfelt cards in her own handwriting, and maintaining the traditions that had become precious markers of their family life together. The experimental treatment had reached a plateau. While Catherine's condition had not worsened significantly, the dramatic improvements Dr. Chun had initially observed had leveled off. The research team remained optimistic about long-term benefits, but the immediate reality was that Catherine faced ongoing symptoms that required daily adaptation and management. Some days were better than others, but the unpredictability had become their new normal. William watched his wife navigate these challenges with a mixture of admiration and heartbreak. She approached each difficult day with strategic planning that would have impressed military commanders, organizing her energy around priorities and accepting limitations with grace. On her better days, she accomplished weeks' worth of tasks, as if storing up achievements against future times when such productivity might be impossible. The children had adapted to their mother's condition with remarkable maturity, developing an intuitive understanding of her good days and bad days. They learned to recognize when she needed extra rest, when conversation should be kept simple and undemanding, and when their presence alone provided the best comfort. George became particularly protective, often serving as a bridge between his mother and younger siblings when Catherine's energy was limited. Charlotte showed her support through art, creating elaborate drawings and paintings that she presented to her mother during difficult moments. Her childish artwork became treasured gifts that Catherine displayed prominently in her private rooms, finding profound beauty in her daughter's bold use of color and uninhibited creative expression. These simple gestures often moved Catherine to tears, overwhelmed by the pure love that required no explanation or justification. Louis, now old enough to understand that his mother was unwell but too young to grasp the full implications, responded with increased affection and attention. He began insisting on longer bedtime hugs, bringing Catherine his favorite toys during rest periods, and asking repeatedly if his love could help make her better. His innocent questions forced Catherine to find new ways of explaining her condition while preserving his childhood sense of security and hope. The holiday season brought both joy and additional challenges. Catherine was determined to attend the traditional Christmas service at Sandringham, one of the most visible and important royal family gatherings of the year. The event would require her to walk a considerable distance, interact with crowds of well-wishers, and maintain her composure throughout an extended public appearance, all while managing symptoms that had become increasingly unpredictable. Preparations for the Christmas service required careful coordination between Catherine's medical team and palace staff. Dr. Chun adjusted her treatment schedule to maximize the likelihood of a good day. Catherine's dresser selected clothing that would provide both warmth and easy mobility. Security personnel developed contingency plans for various scenarios, including the possibility that Catherine might need to leave the service early or require additional support. The morning of Christmas Day dawned crisp and bright, with fresh snow covering the Sandringham estate in pristine white. Catherine woke feeling better than she had in weeks, her mind clear and her energy levels surprisingly robust. She took this as a gift, an opportunity to participate fully in a tradition that connected her family to centuries of royal history, while creating new memories with her own children. The walk to the church became a testament to Catherine's enduring popularity with the British public. Crowds of well-wishers lined the path, many holding signs expressing support and sending love to the entire royal family. Catherine moved slowly but steadily, stopping frequently to accept flowers, shake hands, and exchange brief conversations with people who had traveled from across the country to see the royal family on Christmas Day. William stayed close beside her, providing subtle support when needed while allowing Catherine to maintain her independence and dignity. He watched her face light up during interactions with children in the crowd, her maternal instincts overriding any personal discomfort as she knelt to speak with young admirers who had waited hours for this brief encounter. The Christmas service itself was a beautiful blend of ancient tradition and personal meaning. Catherine found comfort in the familiar hymns and prayers, the ritual providing a sense of continuity and peace that transcended her immediate circumstances. When the congregation sang, "O Holy Night," her favorite Christmas carol, she felt surrounded by centuries of worship and celebration that put her own struggles into perspective. After the service, the traditional royal family gathering at Sandringham House provided Catherine with precious time with extended family members who had become increasingly important sources of support. The Queen, though elderly and facing her own health challenges, spent considerable time with Catherine, sharing stories of resilience and duty that provided both comfort and inspiration. Their conversations revealed the deep bond between generations of royal women who had faced various trials while maintaining their commitment to service. The children's excitement about Christmas morning provided Catherine with some of her happiest moments in months. Watching George, Charlotte, and Louis discover their carefully chosen gifts reminded her of the simple joys that made life meaningful regardless of its challenges. Their laughter echoed through Kensington Palace, creating sounds of happiness that seemed to fill every corner with warmth and light. Catherine had prepared special gifts for William that year, including a leather-bound journal where she had written letters to be opened on future birthdays and anniversaries. She wanted to ensure that her words of love and encouragement would continue to reach him even if her ability to express such thoughts became limited by her condition. Each letter revealed her deep understanding of his character, her pride in their partnership, and her hopes for his future happiness. William's gift to Catherine was a photo album documenting their life together, from their university days through their wedding, the birth of their children, and their most recent family adventures. Each page included brief notes in his handwriting, capturing memories and emotions that might otherwise be forgotten over time. The album represented their shared history while acknowledging an uncertain future, a tangible reminder of the love story that had brought them to this point. The period between Christmas and New Year brought a temporary respite from public duties, allowing Catherine to focus on recovery and family time. She used this break to undergo additional medical testing that would determine the next phase of her treatment protocol. Dr. Chin wanted to assess her current condition and adjust her medications based on her response to the experimental therapy. The test results brought mixed news. While Catherine's overall condition remained stable, several cognitive assessments revealed subtle but measurable changes that suggested ongoing progression of her neurological condition. The experimental treatment had slowed this progression significantly, but it had not stopped it entirely. Dr. Chun recommended continuing with the current protocol while remaining open to newer treatments as they became available. Catherine received this information with the same calm determination that had characterized her entire approach to the illness. She asked detailed questions about timeline and expectations, wanting to understand how these changes might affect her ability to fulfill her roles as wife, mother, and public figure. Her primary concern remained ensuring that her family's needs were met and that her royal duties could be transferred seamlessly to others when necessary. The conversation about succession planning had been ongoing for months, but the latest medical results made these discussions more urgent. Catherine worked closely with palace staff to document her approaches to various charitable causes, ensuring that her successors would understand not just the formal requirements, but also the personal passion and commitment that had made her work so effective. Her dedication to early childhood development remained particularly close to her heart. Catherine spent considerable time mentoring younger royals and palace staff members who might eventually take over these responsibilities, sharing insights gained through years of research, advocacy, and direct interaction with families and professionals in the field. She wanted to ensure that this work would continue with the same level of commitment and understanding that she had brought to it. William found himself increasingly focused on supporting Catherine's legacy while also preparing for the possibility of carrying on their shared responsibilities alone. He studied her methods, attended meetings where he had previously deferred to her expertise, and began building relationships with organizations and individuals that had been primarily Catherine's domain. The children seemed to sense the increased gravity of their family's situation, though they couldn't fully understand the medical complexities involved. They began spending more time with their mother, seeking her attention and affection with an intensity that suggested some awareness that such opportunities might become more limited in the future. Catherine treasured these moments, storing up memories of their conversations, their games, and their simple presence in her life. As January approached, Catherine made a decision that surprised everyone who knew her well. She announced her intention to undertake one final major royal tour, visiting several Commonwealth countries to represent Britain and strengthen international relationships. The trip would be demanding and potentially risky given her condition, but she felt called to complete this service to her country and the crown. Dr. Chen initially opposed the idea, citing concerns about Catherine's stamina and the unpredictability of her symptoms. But Catherine argued that representing Britain overseas had always been one of her most meaningful royal duties, and she wanted to fulfill this responsibility one last time while she still could. The tour could be modified to accommodate her needs, with shorter days and more rest periods, but she was determined to make this final contribution to the diplomatic relationships she had worked years to build. William understood the deeper meaning behind Catherine's decision. This tour represented her way of saying goodbye to the active royal life that had given her such purpose and satisfaction. It was her chance to complete the circle, to end her public service on her own terms rather than letting the illness dictate the conclusion of her remarkable career. The planning for this final tour began immediately, with palace staff working to create an itinerary that would be meaningful yet manageable. Catherine threw herself into preparations with renewed energy, as if the prospect of this last great adventure had given her a new reason to fight against the limitations her condition tried to impose. As she prepared for what might be her final major royal engagement, Catherine felt a complex mixture of sadness and gratitude. She was saying goodbye to a way of life that had shaped her identity for more than a decade, but she was also celebrating the extraordinary privilege of having served in such a meaningful way. The upcoming tour represented both an ending and a culmination, a final chapter in a story of service, love, and remarkable courage in the face of unthinkable challenges. The final royal tour began on a crisp February morning as Catherine and William departed from London for what palace officials described as a farewell visit to several Commonwealth nations. Catherine had insisted on this journey despite her declining health, viewing it as her last opportunity to fulfill the diplomatic responsibilities that had become such a meaningful part of her royal identity. The carefully planned itinerary would take them to Australia, New Zealand, and Canada over the course of 2 weeks. Catherine's preparation for the tour had been exhaustive and deeply personal. She studied every briefing document with the thoroughness that had always characterized her approach to royal duties, but now each detail carried additional weight. She wanted every conversation to matter, every handshake to convey genuine warmth, every speech to reflect her deep appreciation for the relationships Britain had built with these nations over many years. Dr. Chen had reluctantly agreed to Catherine's participation in the tour, but only with extensive medical support traveling alongside the royal party. A portable treatment facility was established in each location, allowing Catherine to continue her experimental therapy without interruption. Medical staff remained on standby throughout each day, ready to provide assistance if her condition suddenly deteriorated. The first stop in Sydney brought overwhelming crowds of well-wishers who had gathered to show their support for Catherine and their appreciation for her years of service. News of her illness had gradually become public knowledge, and the Australian people responded with an outpouring of affection that moved Catherine to tears. Children held handmade signs expressing their love, while adults offered flowers, gifts, and words of encouragement that revealed how deeply she had touched lives across the Commonwealth. Catherine's speech at the Sydney Opera House became one of the most memorable moments of her entire royal career. Speaking with a clarity and passion that surprised even her medical team, she reflected on the relationships between nations and the importance of maintaining connections across geographical and cultural boundaries. Her words carried additional meaning as she spoke about the privilege of service and the responsibility to leave the world better than one found it. "I have been extraordinarily blessed to serve as your representative across the Commonwealth," she said, her voice strong despite the tremor that occasionally affected her hands. "The relationships we build as nations, like the relationships we cherish as individuals, require constant nurturing and commitment. They demand that we show up for one another, especially during difficult times." William watched from the audience as Catherine delivered what they both knew would likely be her final major international speech. Her courage in that moment, her ability to transform personal struggle into universal message about resilience and connection, reminded him once again why he had fallen in love with her all those years ago at university. The Australian leg of the tour included visits to children's hospitals, schools, and community centers where Catherine's work in early childhood development had inspired local programs and initiatives. She met with researchers, educators, and families who had implemented approaches she had championed, seeing firsthand how her advocacy had created lasting change in the lives of children thousands of miles from Britain. One particularly moving encounter occurred at a pediatric hospital in Melbourne, where Catherine met with young patients and their families. A 7-year-old girl named Emma, who was battling her own serious illness, presented Catherine with a drawing of two princesses helping each other through a dark forest. The child's innocent wisdom in depicting mutual support during difficult times touched Catherine profoundly, providing her with an image she would treasure during her own challenging days ahead. The journey to New Zealand brought different but equally meaningful experiences. Catherine had always felt a special connection to the natural beauty of these islands, and she insisted on visiting several conservation projects that aligned with her environmental interests. Standing amid ancient forests and pristine coastlines, she found peace in landscapes that seemed untouched by human struggle and suffering. A Maori welcoming ceremony at Government House in Wellington provided Catherine with profound spiritual comfort. The traditional hongi greeting, where foreheads and noses are pressed together in recognition of shared breath of life, felt especially significant given her own mortality. The ceremony's emphasis on connection between past, present, and future generations resonated deeply as she contemplated her own legacy and the continuation of traditions beyond individual lifespans. Catherine's energy began to flag noticeably during the New Zealand portion of the tour. The accumulated stress of travel, public appearances, and emotional intensity was taking its toll on her already compromised system. William and the medical team carefully managed her schedule, canceling some events and shortening others to preserve her strength for the most important engagements. Despite these challenges, Catherine insisted on fulfilling her commitment to visit earthquake recovery sites in Christchurch. She had followed the city's rebuilding efforts for years and wanted to personally acknowledge the resilience and determination of the community. Her conversations with earthquake survivors who had rebuilt their lives after devastating loss provided her with additional perspective on her own situation. The final destination, Canada, held special significance as the country where Catherine and William had made their first official royal tour as newlyweds. Returning to places where they had taken their first steps as representatives of the crown brought waves of nostalgia and bittersweet reflection on how much their lives had changed since those early, hopeful days. In Ottawa, Catherine delivered her final formal speech as an active working member of the royal family. She chose to focus on themes of service, gratitude, and hope, speaking directly to young people about their potential to create positive change in the world. Her words carried the weight of personal experience as she encouraged her audience to find meaning through service to others and to never take their health, relationships, or opportunities for granted. "The greatest privilege of my life has been the opportunity to serve," Catherine concluded, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. "I have learned that true fulfillment comes not from what we achieve for ourselves, but from what we contribute to the lives of others. Each of you has the power to make a difference, to serve something greater than yourselves, to leave a legacy of kindness and compassion." The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 10 minutes, with many audience members openly weeping as they recognized they were witnessing the end of an era. Catherine's grace under pressure, her ability to transform personal adversity into universal inspiration, had created a moment of transcendence that none present would ever forget. The return journey to London was quiet and reflective. Catherine spent much of the flight reviewing photos from the tour, writing thank you notes to the people they had met, and reflecting on the extraordinary experiences of the past 2 weeks. She felt a deep sense of completion, as if she had successfully concluded the active phase of her royal service on her own terms. William observed his wife during these quiet hours and marveled at her strength. The tour had been exhausting and emotionally demanding, yet Catherine had risen to every occasion with dignity and purpose. She had shown the world what courage looked like in the face of insurmountable challenges, creating a legacy that would inspire others long after her public appearances had ended. The weeks following their return to London brought a noticeable decline in Catherine's condition. The physical and emotional demands of the tour had accelerated some aspects of her illness, and Dr. Chun recommended transitioning to a more conservative treatment approach focused on comfort and quality of life rather than aggressive intervention. Catherine accepted this change with characteristic grace, understanding that she had given everything she could to fighting the disease. Catherine began the process of formally transitioning her royal duties to other family members. She worked closely with palace staff to ensure that her charitable work would continue without interruption, personally meeting with the leaders of organizations she had supported to express her confidence in future leadership and continued royal patronage. Each of these conversations was emotionally difficult, but necessary for ensuring continuity of service. The children's understanding of their mother's condition evolved as her symptoms became more pronounced. Catherine continued to prioritize their needs, spending her best hours with them and ensuring they felt loved and secure despite the uncertainty surrounding their family's future. She began creating memory books for each child, filled with photos, letters, and mementos that would help them remember their time together. William found himself stepping more fully into the role of primary caregiver while also managing increased royal responsibilities. He arranged his schedule to be present for Catherine's medical appointments, adapted their living arrangements to accommodate her changing needs, and ensured that their children maintained normal routines despite the family's challenging circumstances. Catherine's final public appearance came at a small gathering for one of her children's charities, where she wanted to say goodbye to the staff and volunteers who had been such important partners in her work. Her speech was brief but heartfelt, focusing on gratitude for shared accomplishments and confidence in continued success. Many attendees remarked later that despite her physical frailty, Catherine's inner light remained undimmed. As summer arrived, Catherine spent increasing amounts of time in the palace gardens, finding peace in the changing seasons and the continuity of natural cycles. She took particular pleasure in the roses she had planted years earlier, now in full bloom and providing beauty that would continue long after she was gone. These quiet moments in nature became precious sources of comfort and reflection. The experimental treatment was gradually discontinued as its benefits diminished and its side effects became more burdensome. Catherine transitioned to palliative care focused on maintaining comfort and preserving quality time with her family. Dr. Chun remained involved in her care, but the focus shifted from fighting the disease to managing its symptoms with compassion and dignity. Catherine used her remaining time to complete personal projects that had become increasingly important to her. She finished writing letters for her children to receive on future birthdays and major life events. She recorded video messages for William to watch when he needed encouragement or comfort. She organized photo albums that captured the most precious moments of their family's journey together. The silent farewell that had begun with a devastating diagnosis was reaching its conclusion, but Catherine faced this final chapter with the same grace and courage that had characterized her entire life. She had transformed her struggle into service, her pain into purpose, and her loss into a legacy of love that would endure far beyond her physical presence. In her final weeks, surrounded by family and friends who had shared her extraordinary journey, Catherine found peace in knowing that her life had mattered, that her service had made a difference, and that the love she had given and received would continue to inspire others long after her farewell was complete. Her courage in facing the unthinkable had shown the world that even in our darkest moments, we retain the power to choose grace, compassion, and hope over despair.